What you did not hear there is goal, or something close to that. Most of the world has its attention riveted on South America at the moment. Men are willing to take a chance at divorce by ignoring their wives. Some wives may be thrilled to get their couch potatoes out of the house and into the pub. And while we here in America think it's so interesting to note the productive job time lost when the NCAA basketball tournament comes around, trust me, this is nothing compared to the World Cup. But this is a World Cup where play on the field is secondary. Graft and corruption in Brazil that even with years of planning left facilities not even close to being ready, and real concerns about the safety of travelers, match-fixing allegations, and everything still being run by FIFA, which in the minds of those on the outside may rank as one of the more corrupt sports organizations in the world. Let's dig into more than the play on the pitch. We welcome in two guests to Midpoint. First of all, Major League Soccer free agent and former Houston Dynamo forward Calen Carr is joining us right now. We are waiting for our second guest, so we'll say hi to Calen. Calen, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
As a player sitting here watching what's going on in Brazil and what the buildup has been to all this the last couple of years, you as a player had to be tremendously distressed to see the fact that it still to this day is not safe for people to be there, and it really was not ready whatsoever to host this kind of an event.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a big undertaking they've gone under, and it seems like some of the fields are having poor quality. You hear things. I've got some friends on the team for the U.S., and you hear some things about the infrastructure down there that are a little bit unsettling, but we're hoping that they'll pull it together at the last minute.
But that's going to be the question here about pulling this all together at the last minute. How, not even distressing, but how much of a distraction is this for the players? Because from what I have heard from a lot of players I've spoken to and coaches, there are people really concerned about their security and wondering how safe they're going to be for whether they're in the country for a day, a week, a month, whatever.
Well, from what I've heard, the U.S. team is taken care of really well, so I don't think that's a concern for them. I can't speak for everybody. I definitely think there's some concern. Obviously, just outside the stadiums, there's been some protests going on all over the place. You just see it on TV, large social unrest, and I think that's a troubling sign and worrying for fans and players alike.
How distressed is it for the players? Because we have heard so much about the match-fixing allegations that have gone on here in the last couple of months in South Africa. There is talk of a lot of matches being fixed. For the players themselves, though, this has still got to be something you're worried about because people, the fans, are going to look at what's happening here, and they're going to wonder about the actual results.
Well, I think as a player, you just have to worry about what you can control, and that's the game, and not worrying about the opponent, obviously, and I don't think there's going to be any sort of issues like that. You hear about that more in other countries than from the United States. That's not really in our cultural landscape. But I think there's a problem more at large with FIFA in general, and it's a culture of excess. The trophy itself, if that's not symbolic of $10 million, it travels around in a Louis Vuitton case, and just outside there's crime-ridden favelas. And I actually think the people out in the streets have something to complain about, and a lot of the Brazilian national team players come from those places. So I think it's important for them and fair of them to ask what happens to the kids who aren't able to dribble their way out of poverty. And some of those questions are being asked right now.
Calen, I have to tell you something. I was involved in soccer a long time ago when it was the North American Soccer League in America, which goes back to probably when you were not even an embryo at this point. And even back then, people were constantly talking about FIFA, constantly talking about the fact that these are nothing more than fat cats sitting there cashing billion-dollar checks, using the money however they want, traveling around the world, doing very little for the game itself. Is it still that way today as you, a younger guy, and your generation look at FIFA?
Well, I think it's impossible not to see that. I think just this summer they're going to make $4 to $5 billion. And there's been an interview going around with FIFA President Sepp Blatter around the web lately where he's saying that $1 billion they have sitting in the bank is almost not real money and that it's a reserve. And they're nonprofit where they're making these huge money and they're a tax-exempt organization completely, play by no rules. Brazil had a ban on beer in the stadiums for safety reasons. FIFA obviously has a huge corporate sponsor in Budweiser. That ban is suddenly lifted, and they just basically play by their own set of rules and really take nothing into account. And the real question is, what are they leaving behind? And I think there's been about $15 billion of $15 billion to put this on, and a lot of that is going to be left with the people of Brazil to pick up the tab.
How much harm, in your opinion, as a soccer player, has FIFA done to the game itself as it stands right now?
Well, look, I think the game is still the beautiful game. I mean, it's a big business and it's an ugly business at times, but I think once the games start, you can't help but sit back and marvel at the wonder and the skill that's being put on display down in Brazil. And so that will always hold true. But I think it is important to kind of look at the context around the sport and to see how can we make this a more meaningful sport, and in a way to really help people in a situation where you're coming into a country and you're not just taking and you're giving as well. So I think FIFA really has to step up to the plate and do some things to really leave a better mark on the place they're going and not only look at the bottom line for themselves and their corporate interest.
You are asking a lot of FIFA, I'll tell you that much. Hang on just a sec, Calen. Let's be joined now by current sports business and legal analyst and attorney with Goran Sheriff duty in Israel. Bram Marvin joins us today. Bram, thanks so much for being with us as well.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Bram, and we've been talking about FIFA here with Calen a little bit and what they have done and really what they haven't done in so many ways here. But let's talk about the match fixing, which is the thing that has so many people talking right now. It is a travesty, first of all, the billions of dollars that they're spending in Brazil, and certainly people still living in hovels there. But when you look at what's going on, and I'll get to that in a moment, the match fixing itself. How can people trust that the World Cup this year is going to be honestly played and honestly contested?
Well, I think you have to do what Calen said, and you have to trust the beautiful game. As soccer fans all around the world do. What has happened is two major newspapers, the New York Times and I believe the others, the London Telegraph, have uncovered information that not only have matches been fixed, but quite possibly the awarding of the 2022 World Cup to Qatar was also sort of, so to speak, in the bag. But to get to the match fixing, you're talking about a story that uncovered everybody from referees to officials and gamblers from Southeast Asia to actually mainland Europe and England. And so it's very difficult to control this kind of thing, and you really just kind of have to hope that that the game is on the up and up.
Well, that's something else here. When you talk about hope is a wonderful thing here, but let's look at it from the other perspective. You get a lot of hope that everything will be clear, but you will agree with me as well, I think, that there's still got to be a lot of people around the world right now who are going to wonder when this World Cup is over how much of it was fixed. I don't think they're going to be able to get away with that or get away from it.
Well, I think, I mean, I agree with you to a point. I think you have to look at things like phantom calls and things of that nature. I think that those may be more indicative of something potentially happening. It would be very difficult to find evidence otherwise if you're looking at it with a close eye.
Bram, I want to get you to weigh in a little bit on FIFA. I said I would get there as well, but also what's going on in Brazil. Certainly that's part of FIFA here, the tremendous amount of money that has been spent there. I mean, people living in poverty right now still wondering if they can eat, and many people there in Brazil can't even see the games right now. Does this point out that all FIFA really is just an organization? I said this at the beginning. I've always felt that they're one of the most corrupt sports organizations in the world. I'm not going to back off from that. But at the end of the day, FIFA doesn't give one damn about the players. They want to make sure that you shovel as much money as possible into their pocket. And wherever you can play the games, doesn't make a difference if it's in a country that's in poverty or a land that the temperatures soar to 150 degrees in the daytime when players are there. They don't care. It's all about just feeding that wallet, and there's really nothing anybody can do about it. They're in complete control.
Well, when you ask somebody like Sepp Blatter, who is in charge at FIFA, the company line is we're a nonprofit organization, but they're a nonprofit organization with hundreds of millions of dollars in its reserves, which I guess they call like a rainy day, or it's for reserves. But in Brazil, you have a country that's spending $11 billion, I think, on this soccer infrastructure. It's not just limited to stadia. It's limited. It's also transit and other buildings and things of that nature. And yes, you're right. When there are people that are suffering in poverty, it's very difficult for an ordinary citizen to even understand that. The other thing about FIFA too is I believe that these are demands that are made on each of the countries when they host these events, which is why a country like the United States or England or most of the developed nations in Europe they don't really have and in Asia, they don't have a problem hosting these things because they have the infrastructure in place. But when South Africa, or even to take a recent example, Sochi, they built all these things for the Olympics. It does create an economic problem and a kind of a tug of war between those who don't have and the governments who are spending all this this money.
Those who don't have and those who want all the money. I only got about 15 seconds left. Calen, I guess you're going to pick the United States, even though people say there's very little chance?
Well, I'm not going to pick them to win it, but I'm going to pick them to maybe get out of the group and sneak through just by the hair of their chin.
Sneak through the group of death and life is good, right? Bram, I'll give you a shot. Who are you going for?
I still like Brazil, but I think the U.S. can sneak out. They got to get points against Ghana. And when I mean points, they can't draw. They got to win, right, Calen?
Let's hope. Calen, thank you so much. Calen Carr, Bram Marvin, thank you so much, gentlemen. Enjoy the World Cup. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Let's hope FIFA gets a clue sooner or later. Unlikely. Midpoint. We question everything.